informal session of the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners for December 12th, 2017. It is now 1:32 p.m. and we'll get started here with work session, and I am not. Do we have something for the work session? I don't know of anything that is work session materials.
No, we don't have a work session.
Okay, so with that being out of the way, we'll go to department updates, and we do have Derek Worth, our county assessor, here to discuss one of the items on the agenda. So Derek, if you would bring us up to date.
I can do that.
As soon as we get this little
You want to try to do something? Yeah.
technology.
We'll get it figured out. Ken's going to help me out. So let's just talk about sort of a bigger picture update on pictometry and where we are with that. So we, through the Master Services Agreement and the DAS GEO, the Department of Administrative Services GEO Department in Salem, we've contracted with pictometry to fly the county for aerial imagery. And as luck would have it, the last week and the last 3 days of, or this first 3 days of this week, been beautiful weather. Mm-hmm. So they were thinking maybe mid-January and we'd have our imagery back by February. And now they're thinking they're going to wrap it up this week.
Huh?
So we'll have access to it sooner than later, and that's a plus. So there's a couple of moving parts in this whole program, and the first one is the aerial imagery in itself. So we need the base layers, and they are flying at a high resolution imagery capture at 4-inch resolution, and thanks Ken, and 6-inch resolution in the rural where we have predominantly trees and farms and that sort of thing. It'll be a less resolution, more space to cover, but from a budgetary standpoint, we focus on urban. So city of, pick one, they'll all be flown at 4-inch resolution. And I'll show you a little bit of what that means here in just a second. So we approved that contract, and that's going to be done in phases. So we have project 1, which is flight this year. Project 2 is 2 years from now, they'll fly again. And then project 3 is 2022. And they fly a third time. That's as far as we've gotten so far. And what that does is it not only just captures new imagery for the county, but one of the things we have as an add-on to the program is what they call Change Finder. So let me see if I can start this for you real quick.
Very Big Brother-ish, Derek.
A little bit, but less invasive than just randomly showing up and doing some of the same work. What it allows us to do is, if we get to a property and it's been there's a gate or there's something we can't get through, or the resident's not home, or whatever reason we can't do a complete inventory of the property we're at, this will allow us to look from an aerial imagery and say, okay, in 2015 over here on the right, there was some equipment stored and some other things. 2017 on the left, okay, here we have this new building. And so change detection says what was there, what's there now.
Wow.
And then what's the next step in that is, and let me get this pulled up here for a second. This is a fancy one, Ken. Let's see here. I just hit the arrow key. What do you think?
Next step is it always black.
Everyone would like that. Yeah, maybe some districts wouldn't. Oh, there's little buttons down here. There we go. Okay. So the first one we showed was there was nothing, now there's something. Those we usually catch because of permits. So as somebody builds a new barn or a new house or whatever, we'll get a permit 9 times out of 10, 9.9 out of 10, and we're going to get those. Now the challenge that we sometimes have that this pictometry contract solves is when we can't get on the property to do a full inspection. That's the new stuff. On this second scenario here on the right, you have what the barn looked like in 16 and what it looks like now in 17. On the 17 side, that extension, that addition is not always permitted. And if it doesn't get permitted, or if it gets permitted as an electrical change, or it gets permitted as a reconnect. So somebody's going to add power to the other side of the building. They have to get some certain permits. If it doesn't come through as a new building permit, that just gets it would get missed. It'd get missed completely. So the new improvement finder will show you improvements that were not there. The change building will tell you that we used to have this structure and now we have this structure. And then we'll take that and say, okay, did we have a permit for that? Did we inspect that property? Do we have the right value on the roll? And if we've been out there, then it's sort of a moot point. If we haven't been out there because it wasn't permitted, then we have to go out what we call a red tag, which just means somebody built something without a permit we need to go follow up on. What we were looking at here at the beginning, I can make this a little more readable. It's kind of a tough one here. I'm just going to zoom. So at some point, we get to what they call a heat map. And I'm trying to zoom in here a little bit. That might be as far as I can go. But conceptually what this would be is anything that's green would be an improvement that was permitted. And we've got it in our tracking log, somebody's been out there. Anything that's gray has no change. And then the red ones, and if I could zoom in farther, you'd see it. It actually comes down to the property level and says, we have a 40-foot addition on the back of this house, and you don't show it in your tracking as part of a new permitted improvement. So it's a way to, fair and equitable, trying to find all those that we missed, making sure that we have proper inventory is really the right way we want to frame it. But the aerial imagery is the first piece. This is the second piece, and this is the piece that's an amendment to what we already approved in the contract to get the imagery. And this works within our appraisal, we call our CAMA system. That's computer-aided mass appraisal. Basically, when I'm in an account looking at a property, I can pull this imagery up with the outline of the building as we had it before and as it sits now. And I should be able to look at our appraisal program and say, oh yeah, in 2017 we did an addition on the back. And in the event that that's not there, you got an indication that something was missed. So another way to look at bigger sets of data, find out our problem areas, and then send in a team to reconcile those so that we're getting better inventory across the county, and it creates a more fair and equitable tax program. Ken, do you have the ability, I couldn't figure out just how to get to the intranet on that. I wanted to show you guys. Do you have questions on that? I mean, that's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
They draw a picture of what it used to look like, then they tell you what it looks like now.
Computer-assisted
Mass appraisal.
mass appraisal.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and the other thing you've got here that we should all be sort of, I want to make sure you understand in the long-term kind of initiative is we have it's called a compliance agency called the IAAO, and they govern what is acceptable appraisal practice at mass appraisal level. So they say you can use aerial imagery if you have it at this resolution, if you take 3 photos from these 3 different angles, if you so on and so forth. So what Pictometry has done is they're the industry leader in meeting all those compliance issues. And I'll show you some examples of some imagery here just of the courthouse where, if you're on Google Photo and you look down, you see the roof of the courthouse. And what they do is an orthogonal view, which is straight down, but they also have proprietary cameras that allow for an oblique view. And it's not just oblique view like bird's eye when you change the view, and it gives kind of a skewed look. It actually has dimension to it that you can measure height, width, depth. So if we see something we can't, way up, your comment about Willamina Creek rang home with me this morning. I spent a lot of time up Willamina Creek.
Oh, yeah.
But when there's something way up there in the hills, if you will, and we can't get up there because of a logging road or whatever, to be able to measure height, width, depth, and then look at it from a standpoint of what's the quality of construction, it allows us to do desk work that would normally take a field appraiser maybe a full day, plus car.
So have you costed out, Jared, comparing the cost of an appraiser's time and what it winds up comparing to when you get to use this technology?
Yeah, so we run about $58 per account that we touch per employee on the appraisal side, not talking tax now. And they've had success rates in the Maricopa County area. Now granted, that's one of the largest counties in the nation.
Mm-hmm.
So their economies of scales are a little bigger, but they got down to 12, 15 cents an account. We're not going to get there, but if we could get to 20, or if we could get down to 15, what that means is that extra time, labor, resources get spent doing things that we haven't done in, you hear the comment, we haven't reappraised the county in 20 years.
Right.
That's because we're chasing new construction permits out all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could do that more efficiently, then we could get back to doing a reappraisal of the county, and sometime in the 4 to 5 year range, we get all the inventory correct. So then we're back to square one. And then at that point, you even have more opportunity, because then you're just looking at changes. Once you know you have everything the way you're supposed to have it, or at least since the last time you were there, that wasn't 30 years ago, you can start looking at just changes year over year. And that's really where you start to see you reap the benefit, because it's not a staff of 10 appraisers, it's something different. It's doing desk appraisal work and verifying inventory that way. It's a lot of potential upside eventually. In the short run, we've got to do some cleanup to our inventory before we can get much farther, really. Eagle view.
And this integrates seamlessly with our new computer system so that we can utilize this without taking the time to reload it.
Right, so last week on the agenda, we had the pictometry tab. And what that was is taking all of this and infusing it into our CAMA program. So now you've got a one desktop solution that has aerial imagery, the cost valuation model, and GeoAnalyst, which is our GIS layers, so zoning layers and flood, soil types, etc. So you're using all these for land components, you're using this for improvement components, but you're valuing the whole property in one application, which would normally have been maybe 6, plus some field work. Yeah.
So we should see a significant reduction in cost per appraisal.
Yeah. What you're going to see is more appraisal with the same staff, using this tool, these tools, to look at more properties.
And probably more accuracy.
I hope so, yeah. The other thing you get to do here when you're looking at larger sets of, a subset of McMinnville, right? Or this downtown district area. I can take that and say, sort of that same heat map concept and say, homes built in this time frame of this square footage, show me the outliers in value and who's way out here and who's way over here. And that should make sense from an aerial imagery. You should be able to say, oh, that house needs some serious maintenance. The deferred maintenance is piled up to the point where that one should be valued lower. Vice versa. You've got somebody who has a Victorian they've remodeled and it's one of the nicer ones. It should be what it is on the scale. So it gives you another opportunity to look at where properties lie in a range and create equality amongst what we call a market area or a trend area. So there's different segments throughout the county that fit those homogeneous improvement types. You know, we look at subdivisions, usually the greens where I live, all those houses are 1 of 5 plans. They're all the same sort of house. Absent deferred maintenance, they should be valuing somewhat similar. Mm-hmm. Now, if we have one that spikes to some ungodly number and nobody knows why, that'll show up in these aerial imagery sort of heat map overlays. When you take value and put it over the top of the imagery, you can make sense of it without having to drive out there and say, why is this the case? So, let's see here. Without a cookie on this, I don't know. Let's see here. And we'll try this once here. Let's see. Oh, of course. I wonder if I can. I wanted to show you the imagery that we've got piling up for us already. It's just that. You store it on your PC and you'll remember that you're going to need it again. Mm-hmm. One more time. I blame IT for how often we have to change our passwords. Shoot. Well, shoot. Let me see if they were trying to give us an example up here. Oh. Going back. Right back button. More. Get back here. There we go. Government roofing energy software login. And they're not going to really. I was hoping they would have some imagery we could look at. No, I'm gonna skip on that. But we have, as part of the plan that we had, they gave us a imagery layer from 15 to sweeten the deal, if you will. They're flying, I should say 15 and 16. Newburgh was 16, Mac was late 15, and then the surrounding areas were sort of gapped in between. And then they're flying and finishing our flight this week, and hopefully by Saturday. So with Change Finder, what we'll be looking at is what did we have in late 16, and what do we have 1/1 of 18, and then we want to make sure that anything that shows up as omitted or not accounted for in the permits, that we schedule that for inspection, or if we can from the imagery that we have, do it from the desk. So it's sort of the final piece that's bringing all this together. It's putting the imagery and the GIS together so we can lay information over imagery and then putting it into our CAMA system, and then using the tools within CAMA to start looking at bigger data sets with a mindset of we got to get our inventory right. And that's what this is really all about, is trying to get inventory correct so that we can move forward with appraisals that are touching everybody and not just those people who take out permits.
Computer-assisted mass appraisal system.
There we go.
CAMS.
CAMA. It's our CAMA.
Okay.
So questions on that? I wish I could have shown you the pictometry. Maybe I can from here if I just pull up the internet. Okay, I'll give you yours back here. I can just pull that out.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
If you went to our products on there, would you have to sign in to see those under Eagle View?
We have our own logins already, so that's why I was hoping and maybe mine will pop up on this one. It should just be defaulting in the name and the password. But the difference in resolution and clarity and what they're capturing versus what you get with Google Earth or just Google Maps or whatever you're doing, it's not even really comparable. I mean, they're just doing something completely different.
So what do you do because sometimes if you look at your property and it's at Google Maps, you'll just see trees. You won't see any dwelling.
Mm-hmm.
Does this technology allow you to see something that's under a canopy?
Through the trees?
Through the trees?
It does. Well, we do two things. One, we choose our flight times when leaves are off. So besides an evergreen tree, everything else doesn't have leaves right now. And then on the evergreen ones, what we end up finding is, with this oblique imagery, when you can turn the imagery sideways, you can get below 12 feet. 12 feet's about the best we can do. So if the tree cover goes below 12 feet, then we're not going to see below that. But really, I would say somewhere in the 90% range is improvements that we can capture because of urban and because of rural improvements on farm ground. There's not a lot that's buried in the trees. There are some homesteads, but they have usually a space cut out, for the 1 acre home site. Maybe the septic needs to be cleared out so you don't have trees on top of that. And if they can get a flight path over it looking back, so maybe instead of having 4 angles of oblique, you only have 1 or 2. But when the tree level gets below 10, 12 feet, you don't see much in terms of what you can measure. You can still see it. But one of the tools that we really want to take advantage of is the idea that we can measure from the desk. We can measure how big the GPB is or how tall the roof is or that sort of thing. Let me see if I can get this to go here. A general purpose building, farm buildings. You gotta see the courthouse. It's amazing. And I measured it and I went outside and verified it.
That's a GPB.
Yeah.
General purpose building.
Yeah, pretty much. Now this is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not even there. The wharf CO to. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry, I'm taking your time here. I should have this ready to go.
We'll have to call that an MPB,
Municipal purpose building.
multi-purpose building.
co.yamhill.or.us. And the other thing is, but once we get our flight back, you don't log into this website anymore. We just go to our CAMA, and it's all in there. So this connectivity issue is sort of a moot point. At that point, I can't see if I spelled my name right. I didn't. Dang it. H-I-L-L.
Well, I guess we'll have to have a password workshop.
Something.
I can feel your pain. I do this every
Yeah.
time they ask me for a password.
I knew, it's like, which
Yeah,
one did I
well,
use?
Which one did I use for this thing?
I know.
Well, one of the things we're going to do for like Christian and other departments is they're going to have their own user login and sign in. They can use it for whatever reason. Tim or Sheriff Svensson, he'll have it. We'll start to explore the emergency response teams and how they can use it.
Great.
Right out of the gate, just having centoids on improvements, so they have a geo coordinates for improvements. So when they do that building outline, they can tell you the geolocation of the building. So if you had 300 acres or 200 acres or 50 acres or whatever, and they were calling to respond to something, and the building's in the back part of the lot, and from the road you can't see any improvements. Well, from this you could say, oh, I know we have to go.
Pick up the road to get to the.
Yeah, or come in from this way, or
Yeah.
yeah.
Great.
So you're all okay with putting this item on the consent
Yes.
agenda?
And it's budgeted.
And Commissioner Olson is in favor of it as well.
All with the exception of the password.
Would I called it something as simple as Yamhill? I wish I had that for you guys. I apologize on having that
okay.
ready. Carrie did warn me ahead of time, but I had some meetings to attend to this morning, so.
That's good.
Interesting.
Appreciate
Thank you.
the
Thanks.
update,
Yeah.
and,
Thanks for coming.
It'll be interesting as you move forward, get your first photos.
Yeah, that's a good time to come back and,
Maybe come back.
do a demo.
Give us an update and show us
yeah, I would
what
love
you're able
to.
to do with it. That's great. Okay,
Thanks,
well,
Derek.
thank you,
Yeah.
Derek.
Thank you very much. Have a
No,
nice Christmas.
Yes,
if we
do
don't
the
see
same.
you.
I'm gonna be off next week, so yes, you all do have a nice Christmas.
Okay, enjoy
Family,
your time
Thank you,
off.
sir.
family
Thank
coming
you.
in, and
Oh, enjoy.
little ones of all ages.
Good.
Okay.
That's what it's all about.
Have a good one.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Derek.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Derek. Thank you.
Okay, and the next thing we have on our agenda is preliminary consent agenda for our meeting on Thursday, and that includes the approval of minutes from October 10th special formal session. Excuse me, October 10th, 2017 informal. Excuse me. October 12th, 2017 formal session, November 7th, 2017 informal session, and November 7th, 2017 work session. Those are the minutes that will go on the consent agenda. We also have contracts and grants. Approve amendment number 2, Board Order 12-476 to the agreement between Yamhill County Health and Human Services and Yamhill Community Care Organization effective January 1, 2018 through December 31st, 2020. Approve an amendment to agreement number 31460, Board Order 17-67 between Yamhill County and State of Oregon Department of Transportation, Rail and Public Transit Division, changing from a Category B bus to a Category A bus. Is there any discussion on any of those items?
Yeah.
Hearing none, then we'll move those to the consent agenda for Thursday. And then I have a non-consent agenda item, and this is consideration of amendment to the aerial imagery services under Department of, and that is what we just went through with Derek, and we have now, if I am correct, moved that to the consent agenda.
Right.
And
Do we have, is Rick,
Rick agreed. I talked with him. He's not feeling well today.
oh, so
But
it's,
He agreed that it could go to
Okay.
consent. Wanted me to let you know that.
And if for some reason you had any questions, we can always pull it off the consent agenda Thursday.
Sure.
If there's any discussion on it, so. But as of right now, it's there for the consent agenda. And then I have on here item E, which would be executive sessions if needed, and I see nothing on here for that. So with that, is
The
there-
only other item we were gonna discuss that isn't on the list is we were gonna talk about potentially some boundaries or policies around the foreclosed property. issues. And I think Commissioner Starrett, you had some discussion with Christian about this last week.
Correct.
I don't know if you want to wait till Rick's back, or if you want to go ahead and have that discussion with just two.
What is your recommendation?
You can do whatever you like. I mean, you've got a majority here, so if you want to have that conversation. But I know Rick had some, he made some statements at some of these local meetings that were part of the, I think, the reason possibly behind why we wanted some policy. So it might help to have him here. I don't know.
Well, my only concern is I think we were putting the cart before the horse by making comments publicly about a policy we've not yet put any kind of form to. So I think before we have anybody going out and talking about that there are foreclosed properties and different things, we need to understand how we want to address it, and I think that's something we should.
Yeah, and the discussion we had was an executive session, so we really have to be careful how we move out of executive session and discuss things. So I think it is, we do need to formulate a policy that that we adhere to in regard to our foreclosed properties, and make it very clear what the parameters are for the transmitting of those properties or transferring.
Yeah, I think we should have, I think the larger discussion is so that everybody's on the same page. Every commissioner's gonna have a different way of looking at it. I wanted to address the whole concept, of us selling foreclosed properties, and I also wanted to talk about what we are required under the statutes to return to the taxing districts, and then also with an unusual property like the Dayton properties, what would we do going forward? And then also we've got another property we've been talking about in McMinnville for a youth outreach center. So it's a big discussion, but I think the longer we go without having it, the more we have.
We run into problems. So I couldn't agree with you more, Commissioner Starrett, and I think that it's important that we schedule this for a workshop.
Work session.
A work session.
I mean, unless it's something that you might want to discuss at formal on
Well,
Thursday when he's here, or
would it make sense for us to bring an outline to you at a future work session, and that can be a starting point for your discussion?
I think
Some bullets that we think might be helpful.
I think looking at the ORSs give us authority to do, and how we could utilize those properties, and just start from there as a parameter. That's pretty simple.
I mean, there's a number of things you can do. It doesn't really dictate exactly what, or the value at which you sell the property. What it does dictate is what you have to do with the proceeds.
Yeah.
But it doesn't say that you have to sell them for market value.
I think the biggest thing, for me anyway, it's getting them back on the tax rolls if it's property that would. I mean, we want to benefit the county to the greatest extent possible.
Yeah.
And so we've got properties out there that do have some value, and we own them. The quicker we get them back into the pool of generating property tax, not only for us, but for the special districts, I think that's a piece.
And I can tell you what our past practice has been, which is basically when we have them, we'll hold an auction, and unless the county wants to hold on to the properties for a particular reason, if it's adjacent to a right-of-way or makes sense because it's adjacent to another piece of county-owned property that you might want to utilize for a park or open space, it's been to auction them, and then if we have interest from private parties, if it's not bought at auction, then we look at private sales. So, that's sort of been the way we've handled it. I think what Commissioner Starrett, was also looking at wanting to discuss was, does the county want to play a role in encouraging the use of some of these foreclosed properties for affordable housing, workforce housing, or not? Or do we want to do what you just said, be sort of neutral, auction them, and let the market decide whether or not that's the best and highest use of the property?
So there are
or striking that balance.
I think I'd like to start with the whole statute, and this is a bigger picture and a philosophical discussion that I don't know whether we have now, but Oregon is only one of a handful of states that basically take the net proceeds of the sale of a foreclosed property and not just make the tax debt whole, but they then take the rest of the profits. So I look at that as a takings. I look at that as a asset forfeiture. So for instance, if other states, and we're only one of a few, that will take the equity in a home instead of just what is owed to the district based on the tax, we're taking the equity in someone's home. We're not just taking what is owed to us for taxes. So if we've got a property that's got $200,000 worth of equity, and we have $16,000 owed to us, to the taxing districts, we take not only the $16,000, but we take the rest of the money.
Well, we take the entire property.
Correct.
Through the foreclosure process.
Correct.
And I don't know how other states do it, but that is the same as banks would do it.
It's
Well-
a four-year process. If you've
I
got
understand that.
$200,000 of equity in a property and you owe $16,000 taxes, you're gonna find a way of utilizing that equity to pay those taxes.
I understand,
and retain your
Commissioner.
property.
That's not my point. My point is that there are that when you take, for instance, not only the taxes, fees, administrative costs, you take that off the top. It is the equity in someone's home that I don't believe we have the right to. So if you want to, it's being.
You wanna write a check to those people for
I
that.
want to take what is owed to the taxing districts. I want to take what is owed to us for administrative costs, but I don't want to take the equity that does not belong to government. And I think I don't know how we finesse that, whether or not we do have any leeway, because it's what the state's doing. So do we have to follow what the state's doing, or do we say in Yamhill County, we're not going to take what doesn't belong to us?
There isn't a process set up to do it that way. The only way for us to foreclose on properties is to follow what's laid out in statute.
So we don't have a way to say we'll give you the equity back in your home.
No.
We just take the whole thing.
We follow the statute, and the statute, as Commissioner Prim just mentioned, you have to be behind for 3 years before you get on the list, and then you have 2 years to redeem your property. So yes, there is the risk that you ultimately could lose the entire property, but it doesn't happen overnight.
That I understand.
Yeah.
So I understand.
But I don't know of another way to do it other than the way it's laid out.
And I just look at the fact that if every state did that, but Oregon is, as I said, only one of a handful. So lots of states.
I don't know.
Lots of states are giving the equity back to the property owner. So that's just where I'm coming from. But the other part is that if that is the case, how do we do what is equitable, and that is pay back the taxing districts. That's the first and foremost. And I also don't want to. We don't want to ace out any private developers that would be interested in acquiring a property, or private interests. But let's look at the Dayton properties. For example, this was a case where we could maybe facilitate making it so that a developer or a nonprofit could then turn the homes into something that would be affordable, because they don't have the cost of the land involved. So anyway, these are all things that, we have to decide what do we want to do.
Well, and I think we do need to design a policy, but we also have to give ourselves some flexibility in all of our policies, because anytime we get a property, there are going to be some circumstances that might make us want to
Sure.
be a little bit divergent from that set policy. But we do have to start from a base. We have to know that we've got this notebook full of foreclosed properties, and we need to design a policy that helps us move this thing down the road, instead of that notebook getting bigger. I
Right.
don't want that binder to get too thick. And so we do need to get those properties sold, get them back on the tax roll. If there are properties that would benefit the county, and when I say county, individual communities, the cities, parks, we've acquired some of our parks. We have to have that
Right.
ability, but I think we have to start from what is our fundamental purpose, and that would be in our policy. And that policy gives us some allowances based on statute. And, if Oregon has certain ORSs that tell us this is the way you handle foreclosed properties. That's pretty much the guidelines we have to use now. If there is something about a property that we want to do something outside of that, as long as we're not doing something illegal, I'm open to hearing an argument in that respect.
Yeah, I agree. So do we want to just perhaps schedule this for another time when we can have all the
I think
commissioners?
we can have a full
In January sometime.
work session, and it could be a work session around looking at some more of these properties to get.
Well, we have the list of this year's
Yeah, I was gonna
properties
say, we have
too,
about
so-
15 more to add. As you're just talking about the book getting bigger, we do have more to add, kind of from the last 3 years. I'm every week I'm putting them together, just like in our books we have now with all the information, the RMV, who the neighbors are. I'm slowly doing that as weeks go by, so hopefully when we are ready for this next session, I'll have my stuff ready to be able to talk about those. Maybe that'd be a good time to do that.
Okay, so we can schedule out a work session and we can have this discussion on policy at the same time. Okay.
And in the meantime, if, as we have these individual properties that have come to our attention that we want to address, that perhaps in the meantime, we can be discussing what to do with them, if that.
Review what we've talked about and make sure that we are not violating any.
That's completely up to the board's discretion. You can have conversations in executive session. If you're ready to talk about them in open session, you can certainly do that as well. So there's no requirement that it be discussed one way or the other. It really depends on whether or not you're ready to.
Well, if we're gonna talk about it in executive session, then we need to confine our conversation to that.
Correct.
And not talk about it outside, because that's when we start creating problems for ourselves.
Yes.
So do we want to do executive session today and talk about Dayton? Or no?
It's up to you.
What's yours?
If you have some things to talk about, we could.
I mean, again, I don't know if you'd want Commissioner Olson to hear that, or we could do it Thursday as well. If you wanted to give him the update then, or we could go into executive session.
Are we talking about an
conversation with
update
folks that
or
are here.
discussing further the
Oh,
direction
not the
we're gonna go
policy.
with it?
This would just be an update. Well, maybe
It's
we
up to
should
you.
wait till Thursday. Nothing's gonna happen between now and Thursday. Okay.
Okay, that sounds good.
All right. Then with that, if there's nothing further, any updates, Mr. Starrett?
Yeah, I was just gonna update you on, the fact that we're continuing our discussions regarding the foreclosed property on Lafayette with, YCAP, and, might be going a different direction there. And also we do have an update on the Dayton properties. And, let me see. I think that's all I have.
Okay. At the AOC meetings yesterday, we did have some robust discussions concerning opioids, and we had the director from OHA there.
Patrick
talking-
Allen?
Yes, talking about what they're attempting to do. It's a significant problem. As we had the round table here with Representative Bonamici, and that conversation is now getting moved to the front burner with almost any group that we're meeting with, because it's not improving. Another thing that we talked about was the behavioral health issues from OHA there. And I shared my frustration with the millions of dollars that we're throwing out all over the state, and the problem continues to expand, and those dollars are, in my opinion, there's a lot of waste there, because we're not seeing any results. Maybe occasionally here, if they find a program, it's what I stated yesterday, if they find a program that works, and I know Silas has some great programs here, but then they still throw money all over the state, and then they set up these committees to study what he's doing and see how they can make that work, and it just drives you crazy. And I told him, I'm not speaking as a public official and speaking as a taxpayer, I'm really concerned about the way we're approaching this. So anyway, all of these things are rising service, and I think our connection with the association helps us to at least start consolidating our voice, and we can have some drive in forming new legislation or policy that will address these issues. But anyway, we had some good discussion on transportation, forest practices. So, there's a lot of work to do, and I'd love to go back to Yamhill County and know that we're doing several things right when you sit around the table with people from other counties.
One of the things is that came up, and our clerk, Brian Van Bergen, had brought this to our attention. It was a House Bill 3357 last legislative session, where they were trying to get a tax increase, and basically it was just to increase the recording fee in any real estate transactions that the clerk does. And they're trying to add to double the document fee from $20 to $40 to offset, to actually take it and give it to affordable housing. But if you look at what that's going to wind up costing, once again, we're just squeezing out the middle class, adding fees to.
And the newest ask, the $40 has gone up 75.
So this is per document, and I think that's going to come around. Representative Kenny Geyer is pushing that one, and hopefully, I know I will be suggesting that we don't do that, because it adds up.
Well, and the thing about it is, where it's dealing with real estate transaction fees, the clerk over here, we are the ones that have to do all the work. We get absolutely nothing.
Right.
The Realtors Association made certain that any recording fees dealing with real estate transactions, the clerk gets none of that.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another issue that is, we have to be cognizant of, because it takes time. And it's not just that one-time transaction of transferring a house. It's, a spouse dies, now that you're trying to get title cleared, and all of these different transactions of that same piece of property, and each time you do that, you've got this significant recording fee. So some of these things sound good. We can raise all this money to give to this problem over here, and in the meantime we create 6 others. So we've got to really monitor carefully what's coming down. But anyway, that being said, I appreciate everybody being here today, and with that we will close this meeting.
That's a first. I'm going to make it to Whitecap.
I'm going to make it to